Are you ready to unlock your blessings and live the life that God has designed for you? I'm Dr. Derrick B. Wells of Christ Universal Temple. If you're ready to live life to the fullest, pick up a copy of my new book today, Guidelines for a Master, 12 Steps to an Extremely Happy Life. In Guidelines, I detail how making small changes can lead to divine happiness. I've also infused guidelines with quotes from the 1985 film The Last Dragon as timeless reference points. Guidelines for a Master is available on Amazon.com and in the Temple Bookstore located at 119th and Ashland in Chicago. You were made by the Master to be a master. Happiness is a choice. Choose to live happy.
Time for me to be here because congratulations to you on your first book, Guidelines for a Master, 12 Steps to an Extremely Happy Life.
Thank you.
And thank you for calling on me to interview you. You're trying to get me, make sure my skills are not rusty for when we go back for season 7 on Tuesday.
Absolutely. And we couldn't think of anybody better to help us kick off. So this is actually the official launch of the book.
The official launch.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for saying
goodness.
Yes.
I better not mess up.
You won't. You'll do fine.
Okay. Well, I think we need to get into it because if you guys have not picked up your copy, once you hear from Reverend Dr. Wells all about why he wrote this book and the 12 steps that are in here, you will find it very useful, and you will also feel like, I needed this reminder. Because when I was reading it last night, preparing for today, I thought, man, I read it to my okay, let me ask you some stuff before I start telling y'all what I think about the book. Why did you decide to write this book, and why now?
So, when we started writing this book, it was right on the back end of all of the rhetoric that we were hearing leading up to the election.
Okay.
And then after the results of the election in January, there just seemed to be a fever pitch around what was going to happen to us.
Right.
And so the book is really, in part, intended to be a reminder that the only thing that happens to you is what happens in you. And so if you intend to take back the power that is yours by right of consciousness, by right of birth, by right of who you are and whose you are, then with all due respect to who sits in what office anywhere,
right,
the government is really upon his shoulders, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just intended to bring us back to the realization that you are not a victim, you have power. Use the power to craft the kind of life you desire to live.
Because we're all masters.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
We have it in us.
No doubt about it. Absolutely.
Okay, in part of the book, you talk about 12 steps.
Yes.
12 simple steps to achieving a happy life, achieving our own masters that we have. What are some of the top of those 12 that really stood out to you? So
the first step is actually kind of just recognizing that the power to be happy is within you, right? And so recognizing not that it's just within you because it's placed there, but it's in you because of how you were made, right? Here we teach that we are made in the image and after the likeness of God. And because we're made in the image and after the likeness of God, we have power beyond what we can imagine. Our founder used to say, you have to stand on your own big spiritual feet. And so this book is intended to help you remember how to stand firm in the truth that you know, and remember that you are not your circumstances, you are not what you appear to be, but the power to experience mastery is already within you. You just have to work what you have, right? And so if you work it, it'll work for you. The second step is you can clap, it's all good.
Yeah, that is clap worthy.
The second step talks about being able to overcome fear, right? And I'm sure we all recognize that in order to be what you were created to be, you have to be able to get past the fear that would keep you from taking powerful steps, right? And so even quite frankly, even in producing the book, one of the things that as a leader, as a teacher, as a preacher, one of the things that you have to work through is your own internal fear. Right. Because this work means that now my work is on the table to be judged by other people. And none of us want to be judged. None of us want to be put out of the group, of the in-group, whatever that group is. Yeah. And so it did take some fear, and it took some courage to produce the work anyway, as one title of the book says, feel the fear and do it anyway. So we have to be able to feel the fear, recognize that the fear doesn't necessarily have to have power over us, and then get busy doing what we are created to do. And so even when we define happiness, happiness is defined as a positive emotion that is coupled with the desire to do what we are here on purpose to do, right? So my meaning is not in my fear. My meaning is in my faith, right?
Right.
And so it is with faith that I have, that not just me, that myself and Dr. Robertson have put this out, because we know that this work can and will touch and transform the lives of so many. So I'm excited about it.
I'm excited too. Can I ask you though, when you were talking about your own fear in writing this book, and I know I just listened to everything you just said, but what kind of internal conversation, or what did you go to like make you believe what you're saying and actually get you over that hump to realize that fear is just an illusion?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really really interesting in my relationship with God is God gives me the vision, and it's usually bigger than what I'm ready for.
Okay.
Right? And so that means I have to trust and grow up to what God has shown me, right?
Okay.
And so my internal conversation, like many of us, is oftentimes connected to my personal trauma, to my personal failures, to my sense of inadequacy, to my sense of woundedness, right? And when that's what's driving the conversation, most of what I would hear is, you can't, you're not able, you're not going to be able to, they're not going to like it. But then we did it anyway, and I read it. I'm like, whoa, this there's something here, right?
Yes.
And when Doc and I were going back through the first edit, I'm like, man, bro, I think this is on point. And then my critic, my internal critic, and all of us have an internal critic.
Of course.
And my internal critic started getting salty, right? Because my internal critic was faced with what we were producing. And it's hard to argue against what you produce, right?
Okay.
And so we just continue to walk by faith and not by sight,
Faith.
put one foot in front of the other. And what came out of it was guidelines for a master.
Right.
And so it's different. And so you can't just talk about mastery or overcoming your fear if you haven't done it yourself. Well, you can talk about it, but then it also shows up, right? So readers are not silly. They're not naive. People can tell if you're living what it is you write about, what it is you teach about, what it is you preach about. And so we wanted to make sure that we were also living out what we were writing.
Right, and that's my next question, because you have to live it because you're putting it out there, but how do you pass it along to your congregation? How do you get your family on board to live these 12 steps?
Yeah, so that's the
Uh-oh, is that the family laughing in the front row?
yeah, that's the boss Sylvia, and my younger sister Latanya. And so so I don't, quite frankly, I don't make anybody do anything. Right.
And you can't, right, in life?
Right, yeah, no, and I push back when people try to make me do something. Like, Honey and I just had a wonderful conversation yesterday. If I can just blow up Honey's spot. Yesterday, Honey said, we sitting down having wonderful lunch, and Honey said to me, take the trash out before you go upstairs. And I had to make sure I was hearing that right. Because it sounded like she was talking to our son. Right? Like, take the trash out before. So just repeat that to me. I just want to make sure I'm hearing that. You said you want me to so I can't go upstairs first and then come back and take it out? So I say that to say, even in my walk of it, the way to say to my wife, to my children, to my family, that here is something I think you ought to do, is to do it first, right? To model and to lead myself well first. And in leading myself well first, for my family, for my church family, in leading myself well first, they then see that I'm not just talking, but I walk my talk, right? And so that's important to me. To if I say I'm about love, then I love you, and I do that no matter what. If I say I believe we can do it, then I put my nickel in the dime so that we can do it together. Right. So I try to not be the kind of leader who just says do what I say and not what I do. Yeah. I try to be the kind of leader who says you can follow what I say, because I recognize that, as the saying goes, you can't teach what you don't know, and you can't lead where you won't go.
Right. How do you think the principles of the book will help your church and other people?
Well, so our church, one of the assignments that God gave our founder, Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, was for us to be a teaching ministry, right? And as a teaching ministry, we are committed to teaching people how to live healthy, happy, and prosperous lives, right? There was once a time where it was thought to be taboo or inappropriate to talk about being prosperous, right? Okay. And so baked into the DNA of this great ministry is the awareness that we were created to live healthy, happy, and prosperous lives, right? Not a scourge, not a wreck, not something or someone who is not worthy of love or belonging, but rather we are powerhouses made in the image and after the likeness of God again, right? And so what's in the book is what I teach, right? And so there is no delineation between what we teach here and what's in the book. It's, as a matter of fact, once you get your copy and you read it, you will find that you've heard this over and over and over again. But I also believe there's power in, as they say, telling you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you what I just told you, because that repetition gives us the ability to learn at one of the base levels of learning, right? And so I love my church family, and I want to see us do well, right? I want to see us be able to live out the kind of lives that we know applying principle gives us the ability to live. And so so now it's in the form of a book, so you hear me, but sometimes reading it can go where speaking it can't.
Right. And you can come back to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you need it.
Yep.
Okay, so in the book, you use a lot of quotes from the 1985 hit movie, The Last Dragon, because there are some great analogies in there. Why?
So in full disclosure, that was actually Dr. Robertson's idea. Stand up, Doc. As we were talking up the work, he asked me to come check him out one day, and he said, "So what do you think about infusing it with quotes from Bruce Leroy?" And it had resonance with me right off the bat, right? For a couple reasons. One, I think Bruce Leroy actually embodies the journey of a master. Anybody who's familiar with the movie The Last Dragon.
He's trying to call me out. Who has not seen the movie? Okay, good. I'm not alone.
But that's only
got
4
an
of y'all.
assignment
That's about 5 or 6 of y'all.
So then you got to make us hip to the movie then.
Yeah, well, and Darlene recommended that we have it as a family movie, but don't get excited. There's a little bit too much of some stuff for me to be able to present to you in the church setting. Now, if we do it out on the lawn somewhere, there's a different story.
Okay, gotcha. I picked up what you dropped.
Thank you. So when Doc recommended that we approach it that way, it had resonance with me. But one of the other reasons it had resonance with me is because Bruce Leroy's primary antagonist, Shonuff, the baddest mofo around, he is the eldest son of the Reverend Dr. Helen Carey, right? And so that was just another, for me, that was just another indication that we were right on track, because Julius Carey III, Julius Carey III he was one of the primary characters in the movie, and so it made sense that we would one, take Bruce Leroy's story and his journey to become a master, and recognizing that he began thinking that his mastery was to be found or given to him by someone outside of him, right? And so when I remembered, according to what Doc shared, when I remembered that he discovered that the mastery was first within him, and two, when I remembered that Julius Carey is in that movie, I'm like, yeah, that's dope. It works, right? It works. So I feel like the quotes in the text and Bruce Lee kind of narrating the story a little bit, Bruce Leroy narrating the journey helps. And so that's why we did it.
I think what I'm getting out of this is one of the biggest messages of the book is that we already have this mastery in us, just like you said, Bruce Leroy had to realize that. And I guess, how do you hope the book will help us realize that it's already there? We already have happiness in us. It's just up to us to manifest it. So
I hope that what we will realize is that, kind of like having a bank account that you don't realize you have the PIN number to, right? Okay. If you can be abundantly wealthy, but not have the PIN number or the signature to access those resources, and that's just money in the bank that you can't get, which means it's useless to you. And for many of us, we're struggling and suffering and having difficulties that there is a power within us that is intended to help us navigate that in ways that are successful, right? And so I just want us to remember that we have the PIN number, we have the access code, and all we have to do is punch in the right numbers,
Right.
punch in the right principles to then begin to live out the kind of life we were destined to live. Why struggle when you were intended to succeed, right? Everything that God made works, and that includes each and every one of us.
Right. Considering, you talked about this at the beginning about why you wrote this book in January, why you decided you wanted to write this book. Now that the book is out, and considering our current political and cultural and just everything that's happening in the world, how on time is this book?
Yeah, I think it's right on time, right? I think it's perfect timing. Divine order is all in the middle of this. And I also think that when it comes to even the things that we're hearing about, reading about, we have to remember that happiness is a choice, right? And one of the things that a happy mindset does is it gives us the ability to search for the solution rather than to get bogged down in the emotionalism of the problem. Right? So for many of us, when we have a challenge or when we hear something like something, if I can be honest. So after hearing our president's comments on Charlottesville, it began to impact me emotionally because as a leader, I don't understand how a leader takes that position, particularly not the leader of all the people, right? And so, but when it began to affect me emotionally, I had to remember that I can choose to be happy, right? Even in the midst of this, in the midst of his comments, in the midst of what we're seeing in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Because if I can be angry, I can be happy. If I can be content, I can be happy. Why choose the experience that gives me the least amount of ability to be effective in accomplishing what I want, right?
Yeah. That is so true, because it is, everything in life is a choice.
Absolutely. And that's how we create our world. That's how we create our lives, by the choices that we make.
Right. I want to ask you about the influence the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman had on your life.
Yeah. So Dr. Coleman was, I grew up unchurched, and so I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant to have a pastor or a spiritual leader, right? And many of you have heard this story before. My grandmother would listen to the tapes, and I would hear Reverend Coleman's voice coming from my grandmother's room, right? And so while my cousin and I, we would just be going about doing our thing, there was just all this voice that was so full of conviction that was coming from my grandmother's room. And so once I found myself in a little hot water, and like most people, when you get in hot water, you find religion.
Of course.
and so I found me some old time religion, and my aunt, where you at, Aunt? My Aunt Karen Wells was attending Christ Universal Temple. We sit right back over there. There's a couple of my other seatmates. And I called my aunt and said, will you take me to church? Can I go to church with you? And she's like, sure, I'll come get you. Just be ready. She don't like to wait. She will leave you. Like she'll hit that horn a couple times. If you're not ready, she will leave you. And so she brought me here, and we sat right over there. Three dynamic figures come out onto the platform. At some point when we're ready for the sermon, someone gets up to speak, and a voice comes out, and it's not the voice I've been hearing. I come back the following week. Same thing happens among a loving group of people. The people come out. It's time for the sermon. Person gets up to the platform. They open their mouth, and it's not the voice. I give it one more try.
Right.
Come back the following week, and people come out. It's time for the sermon, and Reverend Coleman comes up to the podium, and she opens her mouth, and the voice comes out, right? And that was the voice that was really kind of the clarion call for what I would be able to do to turn my life around, right? So I almost literally came from Cook County Jail to Christ Universal Temple, right?
Wow.
And to answer your question, her influence on me was that my life has not been the same since I got here, right? And so that's what she means to me. That's what she means to me.
Right. Are your principles about God and metaphysical Christianity closely aligned to her teachings, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, and so that we're clear, right? When we talk about principle, it's available to everyone, right? So I don't necessarily have a principle for happiness or a principle for better living that someone else didn't have, right? It's just like the principle of addition. Saint or sinner can take two apples with two apples, put those apples together, and if they apply the principle of addition, they will have 4 apples, right? Yeah. And so I don't have a principle that's different than what Dr. Coleman had. I have the benefit of her teaching and pouring into my soul that gives me the ability to understand how to not only teach principle, but to apply principle. And the benefit of that teaching has made me a better teacher, a better minister, a better preacher, a better leader, right? And so I don't have anything outside of. I have the principles that we espouse, and those principles work without distinction, right? So that's the beauty of Christ Universal Temple as a solution, right? Because as you said earlier, if you can change the way you think and you can make choices that give you the ability to get to where you want to go, you can begin to craft or reshape your life. I did it, right? It's not something I read about. I did it. I am not the same as I was when I got here.
And that's what I was just going to ask you, just looking and listening to your journey, how grateful are you for your past to get you to where you are today?
Yeah. Now, I wouldn't change anything, right? So I'm not proud of everything, but I wouldn't change anything, because I believe all of it is what God is using to not only influence the impact that we will have in this season, but all of it is what God is using to impact the influence that we will have in this moment and beyond, right? So God is not done with the work and influence and reach and transformative work that this ministry is going to do. Anybody who's thinking that is dead wrong, because we are on the come. You know what I'm saying? And I'm excited about that. And I believe everything that happens for a reason. There is nothing that happens by chance. It's all a part of the divine kind of milieu that makes you who you are, and that helps you bring what nobody else can bring, right? So I recognize that I'm a special person, right? Here at a special time to do a special work that nobody else can do, right? And I'm not saying that in a way to brag. I'm saying that because I recognize that nobody else can do what you do. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's only one Val Warner. Say what you want.
Well,
there's only one. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, James.
So we all have a unique giftedness. We all have a unique purpose that we and we alone can bring. Right. And the rub is that when we don't give it, the world is less, because we have not given what we were designed by omniscience to bring, right? Totally. And so I wouldn't change a thing. Again, like I'm not proud of all of it.
Sure.
But I, as I said last Sunday, thank God that I am not today what I was in 1985, 88, right? Something like that. Yeah.
So I know the first book this is the launch of it. Is it too early to ask when's the next one going to come out?
So
you're talking about living in now. I'm already thinking ahead. I see it.
No, so me too, right?
Yeah.
So guidelines for a master, Doc, I'm gonna let the cat out the bag. So guidelines for a master, we are already underway with guidelines for a master for men.
Ooh.
Right?
Okay.
Because one of the things that I recognize about this ministry and about my ministry in particular is I have some work to do with men, right? And it took me a while to accept that. It took me a while to embrace it. But now that I have, I'm ready to do that and to get that in. So if I had to say, without stepping on guidelines for a master to happiness, I imagine that guidelines for Master for Men will be ready at the top of next year. Guidelines for financial peace is on the way. Guidelines for emotional intelligence is on the way. Guidelines for relationships is on the way. Guidelines for leadership is on the way. We tapped into a groove, and we're gonna do everything that we can to optimize it.
Right. So that means y'all got to get the book now, so all of these other ones can keep coming too, right?
And so guidelines for Master 12 Steps. The workbook. There's a workbook that.
Oh, there's a workbook.
Yes. So it's in the pipeline, but the workbook will be a part of the online course that nobody knows about yet. So the workbook.
Exclusive.
The workbook is a part of the online course where we'll just take a deeper cut with those people who need a little bit more than just a first blush read. So who want to say, so can you help me break down the steps? What are the detailed steps that are under this sub-step to be able to accomplish happiness or financial understanding or better leadership or better relationships? So it's underway.
It's underway.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, what are the future plans for the temple?
The future plans for Christ Universal Temple is to make sure that we are in the flow of God's will for this ministry, right? And to be able to meet the needs of our family here right now, and to be able to make the space for those who are looking for us. Because if you are a solution and people have problems, then they're looking for you. Right. And I believe that we are a solution to much of what ails our community, to much of what ails our homes, to much of what ails our country. And so I'm excited about our being at the forefront of this shift in consciousness, and where we present people with the tools and the principles and the strategies and techniques to experience the kind of paradigm shift that will enable them to live powerful lives in their respective areas of influence. And so I see increase, and I speak increase for this ministry. While we sit locally and we take care of people locally, I see global impact for this ministry, right? I'm touching and declaring global impact from this ministry. So locally, we make sure that we take care of our people here. We take care of the new people who are coming. We take care of the people who are looking for us. And we don't limit what God is able to do through this ministry, through what is confined in these walls or in this gate. But we get outside of the walls of this church to make sure that the ministry has its effect, just as it always had, right? UFBL was Dr. Colemans' way at globalizing the ministry of Christ Universal Temple. So quite frankly, the roadmap has been laid out for me. All I got to do is follow the plan, right? Yeah. All I got to do is follow the blueprint. So we'll follow the blueprint, and it works if we work it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Congratulations on the book. All the best. I hope I'm around for all of them.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely.
Ladies, Ms. Val Warner, help me say thank you.
God bless you. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited for the book.
Thank you.
Yes, keep up the good work.
So Val side, now I'm gonna try and see if I can put a little pressure on Val, not membership pressure. So Val said she's gonna try and see if she can get us on Windy City Live. Would that be good if we were on Windy City Live? Would that be dope?
That would be really good.
Yeah.
I'm back at work on Tuesday. Thank you for your patience this last 2 weeks. I've been off work. Season 7 starts Tuesday, and I'll be in their ears.
All right.
Trust me, I know some people. I think I know how to get stuff done.
All right. Thank you.